Today, we're going to crack open an ancient text, the Talmud. But we're not just looking at its rules or rituals. Nope, we are on the hunt for something way more universal. A really brilliant, timeless method for solving complex logical problems. Okay, let's dive right in. Imagine a situation where everything has to be perfect, super high stakes. Think of it like a complex legal contract, or maybe a critical line of computer code, or even a precise scientific experiment. For the ancient sages, a temple ritual was exactly like that. One tiny misstep could unravel the whole thing. So here's our game plan. We'll start with the really strict rules of a specific ritual, then we'll uncover a puzzle, a contradiction that seems impossible. After that, we'll see how the Talmud sages solve it with this amazing distinction they make. Then, we'll test that logic with an analogy, and finally, we'll see why this ancient way of thinking is still so powerful today. All right, let's set the scene. Picture this. We're in the courtyard of the ancient temple in Jerusalem. There's a specific ceremony going on, the sin offering. And in this sacred space, getting it right isn't just a good idea. It's an absolute requirement, with some pretty serious consequences if you mess up. This is it. This is the fundamental rule that our whole puzzle is built on. It's basically a binary choice. You put the offering's blood inside the courtyard, on the altar, that's correct. You put it outside, that's a serious no-no and you become liable. Sounds simple enough, right? Well, as you're about to see, things get complicated fast.
Now we're going to turn to our source text, an ancient legal code called the Mishnah. And this is where it gets really interesting, because the Mishnah lays out two scenarios that seem to completely contradict each other.
First up, the straightforward case. The Mishnah says if you collect all the offering's blood in just one cup, it doesn't matter what order you do things. If any of that blood ends up on an altar outside, boom, you're liable. And that makes total sense, right? Because the whole cup was intended for the ritual inside. Okay, so the one cup rule seems perfectly logical, but what happens if we introduce a second cup? Well, this is where the logic seems to take a really sharp, unexpected turn, and it sets up the central mystery we're trying to solve. And here is the puzzle. Look at the first scenario. You offer a cup outside and then the second one inside. Okay, you're liable. That seems to follow the rule. But then look at the second one. You offer the first cup correctly inside, and then you offer the second cup outside, and you're exempt. You're totally off the hook. Why?
And that right there is our central mystery. I mean, both situations involve one cup inside and one cup outside. So how on earth does just switching the order lead to two totally different legal outcomes? This is the kind of apparent contradiction that the ancient sages just could not let stand.
To figure this out, we now have to move from the Mishnah, which just states the laws, to the Gemara, which is the analysis. You can think of the Gemara as the detectives who are now going to rigorously dissect all the evidence to find the hidden logic. And they start with a clue that's buried in the Mishnah's own words. Here's the key phrase. The Mishnah itself explains that once the ritual is done, once it's successfully completed with that first cup, the actual status of the blood in that second cup fundamentally changes. It's not just extra blood anymore, it has become unfit. This is our first huge clue. So this is the whole shebang. It's this brilliant distinction that the sages make. They separate blood that's just a remainder, left over but still technically part of the holy offering, from blood that is disqualified, which means it's been legally kicked out of the system entirely. Offering a remainder outside? Yeah, that could still be a problem. But offering something that's already disqualified, that's a meaningless act. There's no liability, because it's not even considered valid ritual material anymore.
And there it is. That solves our puzzle. In the case where you're exempt, it's because you first completed the ritual the right way, inside. That action didn't just leave the second cup as a remainder, it actively disqualified it. So placing that disqualified blood outside later on isn't a transgression. The system is perfectly logical after all.
But the sages don't just stop there. I mean, any good theory needs to be tested, right? To prove this whole principle of disqualification, they bring in a completely different scenario. This one involves lost animals, just to see if the exact same logic holds up.
So imagine this. You set aside an animal for your offering, but it wanders off and gets lost. So you do the right thing and you designate a replacement. But then, just as you're about to go ahead with the new animal, the original one reappears. Now you've got a bit of a problem on your hands. You've now got two animals standing there, both technically designated for the same purpose. So what's the protocol? This new puzzle is going to be the ultimate stress test for our disqualification theory. And would you look at that? The results are a perfect mirror image of our two-cup case. If you sacrifice the first animal outside, you're liable. But if you sacrifice the first one correctly inside, fulfilling your obligation, and then sacrifice the second one outside, you're exempt. The logic holds perfectly.
This is the proof. This is the corroborating evidence. By showing that the exact same disqualification principle works in two totally different contexts, cups of blood and lost animals, the sages prove their reasoning is solid. It's not just some convenient little fix for one weird case, it's a consistent underlying principle of the entire legal system.
So why did we just spend all this time on ancient rituals with cups and animals? Well, because the specific case is just the vehicle. The real destination is understanding a powerful and enduring way of thinking. This deep dive really shows off a few core intellectual values. First, this absolute commitment to logical consistency. You can't just leave a contradiction sitting there. Second, an obsession with precise language. Tiny differences in definition, like remainder and disqualified, have huge consequences. Third, the power of reasoning by analogy to build a really robust system. And finally, this idea that intense, rigorous debate is the best tool we have for getting to the truth.
And this is really the ultimate takeaway here. For the people who built the Talmud, the answer to a question was important, sure, but the process of getting to that answer, that was everything. They weren't just writing a rule book, they were building an entire, coherent, logical universe.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? This ancient quest for logical purity, it's not some dusty old relic of the past. It is the very foundation of so many of our modern systems, from the code that runs our entire world to the laws that govern our societies, all of which would completely fall apart without that same rigorous, relentless search for consistency.